The recent calls for action for Indigenous leaders in British Columbia and Australia highlight critical issues surrounding Indigenous rights, environmental stewardship and governance. The UBCIC's demands for stronger protections and accountability reflect a profound connection to the land and a desire for genuine participation in decision-making processes. The internal challenges faced by Whadjuk Aboriginal Corporation reveal the need for improved governance, and Ken Wyatt's warnings about potential legal actions over unmet closing the gap targets underscore the systemic neglect faced by Indigenous populations. Collectively, these developments signal an urgent need for governments to prioritise Indigenous rights and foster meaningful engagement to create a more equitable and just society. More of that later. Kaya, I'm Leanne Djilandi Dolby, and this is the National Indigenous Times Daily News Bulletin for the 23rd of April 2025. On Earth Day 2025, the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs, UBCIC, called for urgent systemic action to protect biodiversity and critical habitats in British Columbia. Real climate action starts with respecting Indigenous titles and rights and following the lead of First Nations working to protect their territories, told Grand Chief Stuart Phillip. With federal elections looming on April 28th, UBCIC leaders criticised the Canadian and provincial governments for prioritising rapid development of natural resource projects at the expense of the environment and Indigenous rights. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip condemned the hypocrisy of governments claiming environmental leadership while approving projects that harm ecosystems. UBCIC leaders emphasised the deep cultural connection Indigenous communities have with the land and called for stronger regulations to hold industries accountable and to meet climate targets. Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price has called on the Australian Electoral Commission to uphold voting integrity in remote Indigenous communities, voicing concerns that vulnerable individuals are at risk of being taken advantage of during elections. As early voting began for May 3rd elections, she emphasised the importance of transparency and oversight, particularly in areas where English is not the primary language. Highlighting the need for greater support and accessibility, Price stated that people in the bush need to be able to participate in democracy effectively and make informed decisions while they go to vote as well. Her comments come amid ongoing issues such as low voter enrolment, poor postal access, and mobile polling challenges in the Northern Territory, factors that continue to disenfranchise many First Nations voters. There has been some internal turmoil within the Whadjuk Aboriginal Corporation has led to its suspension from the $1.3 billion Noongar Native Title Settlement Fund, following revelations of governance failures. Perpetual, the trustee of Noongar Budja Trust, discovered the corporation lacked a functioning board quorum and issued a default notice. The resulting staff redundancies and a shift in heritage work to private firm Swalls triggered concerns, prompting an ORIC investigation into allegations of bullying. Despite the upheaval, Whadjuk insists it is not collapsing but renewing. In a firm public statement, the corporation declared, "This is not a collapse, it is a renewal. We welcome scrutiny and we stand by our process. Whadjuk is not falling apart, Whadjuk is rising." The group maintains it is undergoing a lawful restructure to reinforce governance and service delivery and is committed to protecting Noongar heritage through strengthened leadership and cultural accountability. Former Indigenous Australians Minister Ken Wyatt has warned of potential future class action lawsuits against all levels of government over their collective failure to meet the closing the gap targets. Speaking on NITV's The Point, Wyatt emphasised that all jurisdictions had committed to the agreement, yet progress has stalled, with only 5 of the 19 targets currently on track. He pointed to the rising rates of internal youth incarceration, out-of-home care and suicide as indicators of systemic neglect. Wyatt argued that governments could one day be sued for failing to act, drawing parallels with past legal actions over stolen wages and racial discrimination. Supporting this view, Barrister Joshua Creamer, who was a part of the landmark Palm Island class action, stated, "Class actions are big cases. They're hundreds of millions of dollars, and sooner or later I think governments will have to acknowledge and accept that they'll have to work differently." Creamer revealed several class actions are already in motion, targeting service delivery failures and systemic discrimination. Wyatt also criticised the funding model, revealing that requests for infrastructure support for Indigenous communities were routinely redirected to be solely covered from the Aboriginal Affairs budget, highlighting a persistent lack of cross-portfolio accountability for Indigenous issues. That's today's Daily News Roundup from the National Indigenous Times. For more news, head to nit.com.au and sign up for our free newsletter.